right. Well, I guess we will go ahead and get started. It is 1:30 on the dot. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first ever virtual town hall featuring Congressman Charlie Crist. For those of you tuning in who I may not have had the pleasure of ever meeting before, my name is Brandi Gabbard. I'm a broker associate with Smith & Associates and was the Pinellas Realtor Organization Board Chairman in 2014. I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. The purpose of today's meeting is our attempt to recreate an event that historically takes place every year in the halls of Washington when thousands of realtors from across the country head to DC to attend the National Association of Realtors legislative meetings. I have the honor of being appointed by NAR and Florida Realtors as the federal political coordinator responsible for working with Congressman Crist and his amazing staff on real estate issues and advocating for our industry. I also work with a dedicated team of realtor leaders and association staff that coordinate these efforts throughout the year, where we hold periodic meetings and have constant communication with the Congressman and his staff. The format that you're about to see today takes a meeting that we would normally have in person and puts it on a virtual stage so that our members can better understand how the advocacy efforts work and how to take part in a conversation like this. There will be some time for general Q&A from the viewers. You can use the chat feature in Zoom, which David and myself will be moderating, and send us your questions, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. I also encourage you to use the speaker view on your screen so that you can actually see who is speaking at the time. We're first going to have some specific topics addressed by your leadership team. So let me start with some introductions. With us today, we have your 2020 President of the Pinellas Realtor Organization, Cyndee Haydon. Cyndee is a broker associate with Sandbars to Sunsets team at Future Home Realty. Thanks for joining us, Cyndee. Next, we have Glenn Richardson. He is your current president-elect. He is a realtor with the Richardson Group at Smith & Associates Real Estate. Glenn? We also have with us Tom Shelly. Tom Shelly is not only the broker-owner of Sunshine Commercial Brokerage, but he is the current District Vice President for Florida Realtors and a Commissioner for the town of Bel Air. Thanks for being with us, Tom. On the staff side, we're joined by Pro CEO David Bennett and also our Vice President of Public Policy, Joe Farrell. So without further ado, I want to take this opportunity to introduce Congressman Crist, who is joined today by his Deputy Chief of Staff, Chris Fisher. Congressman Crist proudly serves Florida's 13th district. Born and raised in Pinellas County, he has given his life to public service, most notably being elected as the 44th governor of the state of Florida. Congressman Crist was elected to the House of Representatives in 2016 and is well known as being a staunch supporter of civil rights, public education, the environment, and national security. Now, without further ado, I want to turn it over to the Congressman to say a few words. Congressman? Derek, can we unmute the Congressman?
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes, you are good.
Well, I was just, Brandi, thank you so much for your kind introduction. It was very gracious. And I just wanted to thank each and everybody that's on the call today. Obviously, very happy that Cyndee, Glenn, and Tom are joining us. And of course, Chris, who works in my office. And I have to brag every time I'm on one of these calls or anytime I'm in a gathering of some kind, about the people I have the honor to work with. Chris Fisher, much like Austin Doerr and everybody on our staff, are tremendous public servants and work so very hard, and they're so intelligent and so courteous. I truly am privileged to work with them. I remember, Brandi, when I served as governor of Florida, wonderful people on my staff at that time would always say, or often say, not always, but often say, I really enjoy working for you. And I said, you don't work for me. We work for the people of Florida. And I view it the same way with the Congressional District 13 office, that our mission although, it's a United States congressional office. So technically I work for all the people of the country in that regard, because the legislation, of course, Brandi, as you know, as a member of the city council to our beautiful St. Petersburg, that all those laws that we pass in Washington apply to all the people in the entire country. But home is where the heart is. And St. Petersburg has been my home since I was 3. Actually, Brandi, I was born in Altoona, Pennsylvania, but we quickly got to Florida, and because mom and dad were pretty smart. At any rate, it really is a privilege to be on the call with you this afternoon. We'll do our best, Chris and I, to answer your questions, but know this, I'm committed to your agenda. Much like I strive to be a good public servant, and that means that the people are my boss. In many ways, realtors and myself and other public servants are in the same shoes that way. You represent so many people across our great state, and, help them find a home. One of the most important things that human beings do in their entire life, probably for most all of them, their largest investment their entire life. And so, you break your back to make sure that you find them the very best situation that makes their family the happiest, that's within their, affordability, and in the place that will make their children and their future life as happy as it can possibly be. And so God bless you for that. And, I know that there are a lot of, anxious moments in dealing with home ownership and buying a new home or selling a home. And among them are flood insurance, which we continue to work very hard to make sure that it remains, number one, affordable, and number two, provides the protection that the homeowner deserves, and number three, keeps the market as strong as it can possibly be. I understand how important that is, particularly in a state like Florida, where sadly back in 2008 and 2009, we had the Great Recession. It was a challenging time. I was the governor at that time, and we all worked through it together. And through a combined effort between, local, federal, and state, and most importantly, the people and all of you in this great industry, we got through it. It wasn't fun. It wasn't easy. It took a while, but through tenacity and hard work and integrity, we did. And I was honored to be your governor then. I'm honored to be your congressman now. And with that, my dad used to always tell my 3 sisters and me, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should respect his ratio. And so I'll be quiet now and turn it back over to you, Brandi. And thank you again so much for allowing me to be with you all this afternoon.
Well, thank you, Congressman, and thank you for everything that you do. And thanks for touching a little bit on flood insurance, an issue that is so important to our members. I didn't have that as a question to pose to you, because not only did I figure you might touch on it, but I also know that you are a champion for that issue, and we've worked very closely together for a long time on that. So thank you for really seeing that through for us and for those that we represent. And I just echo all of your sentiments about your staff. I have the honor of getting to talk to them quite often and work with them not only on real estate issues, but issues for the city of St. Pete, and they are phenomenal. So a lot of kudos to you for compiling such a great staff. So moving on into our program today, I just went ahead and put together some kind of specific real estate issues that we as professionals face in our industry. Some of them are national issues, some are very much localized, and some deal with the effects on the economy and our profession in the aftermath of a global pandemic. I wanted to start out with our president, Cyndee Haydon, and have her talk a little bit with you about NAR's efforts and their position on resiliency and sustainability. So Cyndee, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Crist. It was special to hear you talking about your years of service, because I had the pleasure of actually having you make time for Leadership Pinellas in 2008 when I was in that class. And then like you, I was critical in Biggert Waters and flood insurance. And so there's so many things. I'm grateful for your leadership in the area of our environment and in real estate and supporting us. And so what's interesting is my journey with flood insurance took me this past year to be involved with NAR's presidential advisory group to really look at sustainability, how we can become a leader in the evolving environmental challenges and concerns, and how that flood insurance has typically been a challenge in the Tampa Bay area, but we are now realizing and seeing that there are physical risks associated with extreme weather events. Now we have sea level rise. And the questions that people are asking us is, you know, affordability has been an issue, as you touched on, and now people are wondering, you know, will real estate and that home that they bought continue to be affordable into the future? And so, as you mentioned, it's one of their largest investments coming off of this COVID-19. People are finding that a structure in a house is truly a home, and where we need to be safe and happy and spend our time. And so one of the things that I really wanted to talk about is see what you are seeing with the impact on, you know, prices and public policy addressing this, and possible solutions, especially considering that, you know, as we know from flood insurance, we're ground zero from an elevation standpoint, with 55,000 of our homeowners grandfathered and many below base elevation. So I'll pause a minute and just kind of, again, as I've continued to learn, I see the interconnectedness of these issues, and I see that they're really complex, and I appreciate the work that you're doing in this area. And I would love to just hear more about your thoughts on possible solution, directions, ideas on how you and how we support our communities going forward on this topic. Thank you.
Not at all. Not at all. Thank you, Cyndee. And thank you for your service and all that you do in the real estate realm. It's so important. And, you know, having touched on the flood insurance issue briefly, my primary concern, and Biggert Waters was a wake-up call, a shock, and challenging. And so, you know, that kind of raise or a quick rise, if you will, in the cost was a sticker shock issue for many, obviously. And what I'm striving to do is, as I mentioned, make sure that we maintain appropriate coverage for the security of individual homeowners, but at the same time, don't let it go out of control in terms of the cost and affordability, where it's out of reach for too many people. Or any people, frankly. And so, you know, I used to be on the Financial Services Committee. This was an issue that we dealt with directly. Subsequent to the November 2018 election, the speaker was kind enough to put me on appropriations, which is kind of unusual for, at the time, a mere sophomore in Congress, if you will. And but I had to give up a committee assignment in order to do that, and it was financial services. So while I still am very involved and entrenched with the issue of flood insurance, especially because of the district I have the honor to represent. I mean, you know, Pinellas is a peninsula, as we all know, as is the state. And so, you know, this kind of issue is one that's near and dear and touches all of us very closely. So, you know, there is discussion ongoing, has been for a bit. You know, there's quite a debt in the flood insurance program. And there has been discussion in the past of Congress forgiving the debt. And it strikes me that that's a good idea, because, you know, this is a program that the federal government provides that has had its challenges in the past. I think the, you know, floods that have occurred in Michigan, for example, not too long ago, give us a reminder that this is not just a Florida issue, although we contribute more than any other state, as I'm sure you all are aware. But by the same token, it can hit anybody, anytime, anywhere. And so I think people are more sensitive to the fact that we have to make sure, number one, that it continues in existence. Look at ways that we can partner with the private sector. As you know, they've been reluctant to some degree to participate. Which I understand. I mean, you know, there's risk in any kind of insurance. And so that's always a difficult and sensitive balance to draw, the risk reward ratio, if you will. And so, you know, as we go forward, I think you're going to see advocates primarily, from states that are coastal states. And on a bipartisan note, I want to give you some encouragement. When I still was on financial services, the issue was coming to a head. There was concern about, the fact that the government would close down, there wouldn't be coverage. And I know you've all followed that as more closely, or at least as closely as we were in my office. And so, I thought, well, gee whiz, here I am. I'm a Democrat from Florida in one of the districts that's most at risk to this issue. And so I reached out to somebody who I had met very shortly after I got to Congress, from Louisiana, happens to be a Republican, and his name is Steve Scalise. And so he was always very gracious to me, and on a personal level. So when this issue was starting to come to a head back in 2017, I approached him and I said, Steve, I hope that, as a member of Congress from Louisiana, obviously very sensitive to this issue, that, we can draw some kind of conclusion to make sure that both our constituents and those throughout the country don't have to worry. No one should ever have to worry in life. And at least that's my philosophy. Worry is a terrible thing. And so he was gracious enough to say, we're going to come to a conclusion. At the time, the Republicans were in the majority. And so that gave me great solace that he took that attitude and that approach, and he was true to his word. I got to give him credit. And we got through that challenging time back then. And that same kind of attitude, I think, will apply if there's any, crisis, quote unquote, that approaches flood insurance as we move forward in 2020.
Thank you. One quick follow-up. Outside of flood insurance, we're seeing more and more concerns about different topics like sea level rise and extreme weather events. And so we're hearing from people like BlackRock that they're starting to look at putting pressure on financial institutions, on divesting of properties and the impact on the 30-year mortgage on one hand. And then the other is, assuming those things are coming towards us, do you have any ideas or suggestions for us on how we might fund these, mitigation and resiliency and adaptation opportunities? Maybe something, I don't know, like a PACE loan, but not that it has negative equity, right? So, what I've seen in that arena is we elevate a house, but we don't get the appraisal value of what I could show a business case for. So, in that financial realm, I just see a lot of competing forces to continue. And it's like, I think people want to do the right thing, but it's like, how do we get them there with a plan that can help homeowners as well as cities, their bond ratings and stuff like that, with old roads, old bridges. I mean, all these things that affect our resiliency. So I know that's a big topic, and if I get too much, Brandi, cut us off and we can revisit it. But, I'm just seeing that all these things are really tied together, as I'm sure the Congressman knows. But, many of our members are just now learning it's not just flood insurance, right? It's how all those pieces go together. And being an older community, I see that we are going to have some challenges going forward. And so, as always, your wisdom and insights appreciated.
Well, that's very kind of you. I'm not sure how wise it all is, but at any rate, one thing that has occurred to me, Cyndee, and when you talk about mitigation, sea level rise, climate change, what have you, it's real, it's present, and many of the cities already in Florida, if not most, certainly the coastal ones, are having to deal with this issue. And as I look at it, to me, infrastructure and infrastructure development and progress is one of the least partisan issues I can imagine. That and probably national defense. And it strikes me that, the need here is obvious. I mean, you go down to Miami and Miami Beach in particular, and, in certain times, you will have sea level rise at such an extent that the streets are flooded when it's not raining. When that happens, that tells you something, that the sea is rising, that we have to deal with it. Dan Gelber is the mayor now of Miami Beach, a dear friend of mine that, when I was serving as governor, he was in the state Senate. And we had a very good bipartisan relationship. And as a result of it, I followed his career and what he's doing now in executive branch as the mayor of Miami Beach. And he's been a great leader. And so my thought after the 2016 election, the last presidential election, that one of the greatest things a new president could do is to put forward a fairly nonpartisan issue. And to me, that issue, as I stated earlier, is infrastructure. Who in America doesn't realize that we need new roads or new bridges or improving our airports, although we're blessed with Tampa Airport. But, that's not the case at LaGuardia or, many airports across our country. And we continue to see bridges collapse. And, when you travel to a place like China, for all its, woe that it presents in terms of infrastructure in Asia and other parts of the globe, you see other countries that are investing significant amounts of their federal budgets to make sure that they continue to have infrastructure that is safe, that is modern. I think it was Michael Bloomberg who said not too long ago that in the world, there are 19,000 miles of high-speed rail, 0 in America. And, that's kind of an astounding statement. And true at the time. I mean, that may have been modified at somewhat. California's been working on theirs for a while. But at any rate, the point and the fact of the matter is that in order for us to maintain our coastline, protect our, front, waterfront homes and what have you, I believe investment at the federal level as well as the state and local level is so critical in order to address the very important issues, Cyndee, that you raise in sea level rise and other issues that are going to be attended to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cyndee. And Congressman, I kind of wanted to stay in the same realm of resiliency, but talk about it as it pertains to our economy. And so I want to ask Glenn to join us and kind of discuss these specific economic issues, economic vitality in the face of disasters, such as what we've seen with our pandemic, or any potential environmental disasters that we could have here in Florida. So Glenn? And it looks like Glenn might have lost audio. He's reconnecting. Hold on just 1 second for us. Maybe. Glenn, are you with us? Well, why don't we just go ahead and have that conversation while Glenn is trying to get back in sync with us. He's frozen right now. So I think kind of, the place that we want to go with this is more, we are very heavily dependent, as you know, on tourism. We're very heavily dependent on our hospitality industry. And, we've seen how vulnerable that can be. And so what are your thoughts on how we can bolster our economy here in Florida and make it more diverse and not so susceptible?
That's a great question, Brandi. I think that, you stated the obvious that, we are so dependent on tourism and hospitality. And, as I tell people all the time, look, we're blessed to be Floridians. I truly believe that. And, people come to Florida in droves again. And that subsided for a bit during the Great Recession because the economy was crippled. Let's face it. However, we did come through it, as I mentioned previously, and came through it, with a lot of pain. But we did get through it. And also during my time as governor, that's when the BP oil spill occurred. And you talk about it was the worst environmental catastrophe in the history of America. And continues to be to this date. Now, if you're in a state like Florida, and even though the spill is off the coast of Louisiana, the media shows and depicts the scene, in parts of Louisiana and close to, Escambia County, Pensacola, and Florida, where I saw, some oil and tar balls actually wash ashore. We didn't really see that down in Pinellas County much, if at all. But you show those pictures of the Pelican covered with oil, and it goes all the way, around the globe, including to London, where so many of our tourists come from. You got a problem. And we had a problem. And it hurt our economy, it hurt our tourism, it hurt the hospitality industry in many ways as we're being hurt today with this pandemic. I mean, people don't travel very much, which is prudent. The tourist industry, has not really reopened that much, although it's gotten healthier. And we've had this slow step-by-step reopening, which I think is appropriate and is starting to help our economy. Although I have to tell you, I read this morning in the Wall Street Journal that probably many of you did as well, that, 40 million Americans are out of work now. I mean, those are like Great Depression numbers. And so this is not going to be easy to get through a pandemic, or any easier than it would be to get through, an environmental disaster like the BP oil spill. Although this one, I think, much worse because of the significant loss of life. It's heartbreaking. But how do you get through it? You just do the best you can. And, with the pandemic, with the BP oil spill, how you're addressing those issues, you gain wisdom from them, especially in the current one, COVID-19, because it's unprecedented, it's novel. You're trying to address it, and it's almost as though you're flying the plane while you're building it. And there's a lot of truth to that. And after each day passes, you gain more wisdom, whether it's, with an environmental situation or, in this case, a health situation. And so I think that we'll gain more and more wisdom and knowledge as to how to deal with these issues better and better going forward. And I have faith. And I want to not back away from that kind of comment. I believe very much in God. I'll just say it. And I have great faith in the fact that, he loves Earth. He's the creator, for crying out loud. And so, having that faith, trying to do what's right, being responsible, staying on task, staying on point, all of us have a requirement to do that, to be good stewards of the land or the water. And I think that all of us will be. I think we cherish the existence and the environment that we have. And so long as we do and we stay focused on it, we'll be okay.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's faith is really all most of us have these days. So I definitely share in that with you. Congressman, so I know that your staff shared with you some of the major topics that NAR has prepared as our legislative priorities for this year. Several of them pertain to mortgage availability and our increasing need for affordable and workforce housing and housing supply in general. I wanted to ask Joe to join us in our conversation at this time and discuss a few of these issues, specifically the SALT marriage penalty. Joe, can you take just a moment to explain to members who may be listening what this penalty means before you ask the Congressman your question?
Yes. Thank you, Congressman, for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Great. A couple of years ago, Congress and the federal government passed a new tax reform package for the country, and it affected different states differently, specifically the people in those states differently. And for the most part, Florida did very well. And thank you for your representation on that. And I really think all Floridians should be very thankful of how that turned out. It's very different from people that are in New York, California, places like that. But one of the things that came out of it that we look at are basically marriage penalties when it comes to taxes, and SALT specifically is one of them, the state and local tax deductions. The cap is the same as whether you are an individual or if you are a married couple. So actually, when you get married, when you come together, it should double. Instead, it doesn't, and therefore there's kind of a penalty there for people when it comes to that. And in Florida, that has to do with property they own, specifically property taxes. We don't have a state income tax like the aforementioned states. I was curious your thoughts on that. And also, if you wanted to go in, another one that falls under that is federal student loans and the ability to pay. That's another one that has a similar issue, that if you have someone with a student loan, a federal student loan that has lower income bracket, they marry someone in a higher income bracket, and then the formula is readjusted for both of them, their costs go up and what they have to pay each month, and that can affect how much you can afford to pay towards a house in a given month. or an apartment. So just curious your thoughts on those, and thank you for all you do.
No, not at all, Tom. Thank you. I appreciate the questions, and they're very important. Let me start with the student loan one first, if I might. Number one, I think the cost of college in our country is absurd. I think it's embarrassing, frankly. I really do. And I don't understand it. I just don't. And it seems to me that anything that the federal or state government can do to reduce the cost thereof is critically important. Now, I think we're blessed in Florida, as I mentioned earlier, and I think we have great universities. We used to call them community colleges, but state colleges now. They're four-year institutions, as you're aware. And we have many great programs in Florida to try to reduce the cost of college education for our students and our families. And I think that it's important that we maintain those things like Bright Futures, for example, the prepaid plan that I think is amazing to the state of Florida and to the students of our state. And that kind of thing, I think we need to try to replicate as much as we can at the federal level to try to alleviate that expense. And as you all know, in your industry in particular, we got almost 1,000 new residents every day in the Sunshine State. And one of the things they're looking at keenly, and as they should, is the quality of the schools in the cities, municipalities, neighborhoods that they're looking at. And so it's very important. I'm a product of the public school system in our state. I graduated St. Pete High, and I graduated from Florida State University. So also, our state university system, and I believe strongly in it. I had three sisters, and two of them were public school teachers, right in Pinellas County. And my dad, as even though a physician, he also served on the Pinellas County School Board and ultimately its chairman. And so, it's in my blood, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that we need to support it and stand by it, stand by our teachers, stand by our administrators. They have a tough job. And after parents, they probably have the most influence over our children in their lives. And so, supporting that system, I think, is absolutely critical. I've always been committed to it. One of the things that I think your membership could do to help is, as you're doing right now, actually, is continue to reach out to members and state legislators to encourage their support and ongoing persistent support of our educational system, because it has a direct impact on your industry that is quite significant. As it relates to affordability, assault, mortgages, marriage penalty, I'm pretty much a fiscal conservative. I don't like to raise people's taxes. I never have. I'm also the kind of guy who wants to protect the environment. Frankly, and Brandi and I have discussed this in the past, that, for me, politics is not really right versus left. It's always sort of come down to right versus wrong. And, I don't want to waste my own money. I certainly don't want to waste the money of any of your constituents, if you will, your customers. And so any way that you can advise myself and my office as to how we can, move forward and make mortgages even more affordable. We've done some of that already, frankly. Since this pandemic arose, we have, in the House at least, and the Congress generally, initially has allocated $3 trillion to help people, small businesses, entrepreneurs across the board. The House, I think to its credit, has added another $3 trillion more to be helpful to Americans in a time of need, that will help them and help our economy as it relates to their real estate, not to have evictions, for example, suspending mortgages for a while, doing the kind of compassionate, empathetic things that people in a international crisis deserve from the richest country in the world. And not only that, we're the richest country in the history of the world. I mean, what would it say about our federal government or our state governments if we didn't take steps to have that kind of empathy, that kind of compassion to people who are suffering significantly, many of them sadly dying? It would say that we were out of touch and didn't care. Well, for all the criticism Congress may take, I think in a bipartisan way for the most part, that this Congress has stepped up. And, because all of us probably know somebody who has passed from this virus or has gotten it. I certainly do. And, with the numbers the way they are right now, I'm sure every member of Congress does. And so it's hard to go back home or report upon a vote you had that didn't support, continued support economic for the American people. And one example I can share with you about myself is, with $1,200 initially went to many Americans making less than $75,000 a year, just so they could make ends meet, put food on the table. Well, I have recommended to leadership that we double down on that and say that we'll have another $1,200 followed by another $1,200. In other words, $1,200 times 3. I just think it's important that, as I said earlier in our discussion, people should not have to worry about putting food on the table and making their rent or making their mortgage. And so I think the Congress has tried very hard, and our votes prove it, to fill that gap. And we'll continue to do so.
Well, thank you for that, Congressman. And, one of the things that is so important to us is the affordability and the accessibility factor. And
Right.
We see so many people, especially in the Tampa Bay area, that are very cost burdened. One of the things that makes people so cost burdened is access to transportation. We know that a robust and a diverse transportation system improves quality of life and people's ability to access good paying jobs, which therefore directly affects their ability to buy a home. So I wanted to ask Tom, because he is one of our leading experts in affordable housing and transportation issues, if he could join us and kind of discuss this a little bit. Tom? You are on mute still.
While he's on mute, did I say Tom instead of Glenn in the last line of questions? I apologize. Please forgive me.
Well, no, that actually would have been Joe, but it's okay.
Joe, I should know that.
He still answered. So, yeah, he did good, so.
Well, Joe, my apologies.
Hey, there's a lot of moving pieces going on.
My
Don't worry,
apologies
I'm sure
to
you
you,
talk to a
Joe.
lot of people every day.
My apologies to you, Joe. I should have known better. My middle name is Joe, so there's no bad Joe. And please accept my apology and your forgiveness, I hope.
Oh, please, no apology needed.
Thank you, Brandi, and thank you, Congressman Crist, for your time. You've always been accessible, and we certainly appreciate that. As you mentioned, Congressman, infrastructure has been a huge challenge. The House keeps coming up with bills, and yet the U.S. Senate won't take up the infrastructure bills. Is there anything that we could do to help with that issue?
Yeah, elect some new senators. And I know that's a short answer, but seriously, I mean, listen, this all comes down to who wins an election. And people who are committed to improving our transportation system are the kind of people we need to elect. I mean, people try to make politics and many things in life complicated. For me, it's not complicated at all. I mean, I pretty much see things in black and white. Either you're good or bad, or you're right or wrong. And I wear this yellow wristband every day that says, practice the golden rule every day. And as you most, I'm sure, know, the golden rule is do unto others as you would have done unto you. And so, if you have people that understand the importance of transportation, that's a good thing. And we in Florida sure understand how important it is. I mean, I drove over to see the launch, well, the non-launch, as it were, on I-4. And even though the traffic is down somewhat because of the virus that we're dealing with, it's still pretty tight. And if you're ever down in South Florida on I-95, it's rough. And of course, those of us in the Tampa Bay area, it's difficult getting around. It's not easy. I'm proud to tell you, however, that just yesterday, the president tweeted about a over $20 million project that will connect downtown St. Petersburg to the beach that Pinellas County has been striving for years. And, you know, I supported it, obviously. We were able to get it done. And it was further announced this morning by members of the Pinellas County Commission. And so the progress is being made. It's not easy. It can be challenging. But if you're persistent and tenacious and lead with a good heart, a pure heart, and never give up, those things can happen. And I have faith that they will. And, you know, you're right. The House has been very good about it. The Senate, not so much. But the greatest power we have as a people in terms of policy is a vote. And I tell people all the time, what a great honor it was to serve as your governor, now in the U.S. Congress, and, you know, initially as a state senator. But the highest office in the land is the one we all hold, citizen, because it's only citizen on any given election day who can change or keep those people if they think they're doing a good job. That's democracy, and it's beautiful. But it's only beautiful if we all exercise it. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, or you wouldn't be sitting on this call, you know, on a Friday afternoon, listening to all of us for 45 minutes or however long we're going. I think I have to wrap pretty soon, though, Brandi. But at any rate, the point is that you're committed and you care and you take your citizenship duty seriously, because it affects not only your business life, it affects your family's life. And so, again, I just want to thank you for what you're doing and how engaged you all are. It's you're great Americans, and I appreciate you for it.
Thank you, Congressman. And Florida Realtor has been the strongest advocate for affordable housing in the state of Florida and the Florida Housing Coalition. CARES Act did say there's no evictions right now, and that will certainly help renters. Many of our members are property owners that rent out property or property managers, and perhaps there could be some tax relief or some relief for the owners that are not getting paid the rent right now.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, we haven't had our last stimulus bill during this crisis that we're in. And, you know, that's what's so important going forward. It's incumbent upon us in Congress to continue to listen, because, you know, different areas that may have slipped through the cracks are going to be identified rather rapidly. And therefore, measures have to be taken as we go forward to make sure that those gaps are filled, that people are cared for. And this is just another example that you cite, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Brandi?
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Congressman. And just one more quick question, if we could. I'm not seeing anything in the chat from anyone, so I just wanted to let everyone know that if you are tuning in and you have a specific question for the Congressman, please put it in the chat, and we'll address those as his time allows. But David, I quickly just wanted to turn it over to you. I know that you had some questions on behalf of our members about economic recovery and COVID-19 response. Was there any follow-ups to anything that the Congressman already shared with us that you wanted to kind of put forward to him on behalf of our 10,000 members?
Not real specifically, but I did want to give a shout out to something the Congressman said, and thank you, Congressman, for being on with us today. I have a wonderful staff, so I totally agree. We came through this very, very well, and they've been very responsive to our 10,000 members. But question for you is, we also, you know, as much as we're engaged in public policy, we're also very, very engaged in community and community investment type projects. So our 10,000 Realtor members and affiliated members, what would you suggest would be a good next play for us to engage in community and get people back to work and protect those that are vulnerable? 40 million people out of work. I mean, it is putting a strain on everyone.
Oh, it's shocking. It's shocking. And, you know, the notion that many people in the United States would be out of work is it's tragic. You know, I don't know how else to put it. And I think, you know, one of the ways that all of us can help is to be attentive to, you know, industries like, you know, real estate, which is so critical to the future of the Sunshine State, and of course, many other parts of our country, but in particular, I think Florida. And so what I encourage you to do what you're doing. You know, you're hardworking, you're courteous to your customers, you treat them with dignity, you try to find them the best home for their family. You know, as I touched on earlier, how important is that? I mean, my word, you know, it's one of the most important things that a family unit can find, and you help them do it in an amazing way. And so I would encourage you to continue to do that. And for those of us, you know, in Congress, I'm going to try to go to the launch again tomorrow. You know, with the grace of God, it'll get up in the air and safely. You know, we recognize the importance of the space industry, not only to America, but in particular to Florida. You know, I'm on the East Coast now, and the launch tomorrow is supposed to go at 3:22 or something, I think, in the afternoon. It's not just important to Florida, though. It's important to Pinellas County. I mean, some of the components that will go up on that rocket tomorrow, if the weather allows, were built in Pinellas County, Florida. And, you know, Honeywell as an example. So our duty as public servants to recognize and support those kind of things. All of our duty as Americans is to treat others right. You know, whether they're our customers, our friends, what have you. That kind of kindness and goodness is in much demand today. You know, you hear all about partisanship and arguing, and, you know, I'm sick of it, to be honest with you. But I'm also an optimist, and I can tell you that in the past 2 months or so that we've been dealing, well, more than it now, that we've been dealing with this pandemic, I should say. I've never seen more bipartisanship in the United States Congress with any other issue. And so that encourages me. And that goodness, I think, is a testament to what God would want. And, you know, to live a decent life and do the right thing and treat others, as I said, you know, like through the golden rule.
Well, thank you, Congressman. And I just wanted to say on behalf of the National Association of Realtors and all of the members that you serve here in Pinellas County, such a big thank you. You are considered to be one of our Realtor champions, and we are honored to have you serve and protect our industry, home buyers, sellers, and the American dream. So thank you for being with us today, and I hope that next time we are together, it is in person. And is there any final words you'd like to say to everyone? I know that your time is valuable, so.
No, Brandi, thank you. Thank you so much for not only what you do on the City Council of St. Petersburg for the real estate industry, but thank you for your friendship. I value it and cherish it very, very much. And to all of you on the call, thank you for the opportunity to visit with you this afternoon. It means a great deal to me. It helps Chris and I serve you better in my office. And whatever we can do going forward, don't ever hesitate to call. If you all have a pen or a pencil, my cell number is 727-804-8035. Don't ever hesitate to use it. You know, I work for you. You pay me. I'm grateful, and I take it seriously. So God bless you all, and I hope you have a wonderful, safe weekend. And thank you for having me again, Brandi, very much.
Thank you, Congressman. And everyone, I can definitely attest to his accessibility. And that actually is his real cell phone number. That is not a fake. So definitely reach out to him. But if you ever need anything, you know, as your Realtor representative to the Congressman, you can always reach out to me as well, or to Joe and David and your leadership team. So I just want to thank everyone for taking a Friday afternoon to hang out with us for a little while. It has been such a pleasure, and I wish you all happy success this weekend in real estate. Be safe and be well, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Brandi.
Thank you all.
Godspeed.
Have a wonderful weekend.